So the next question says, what do economists mean by the demand for money? What is the disadvantage of holding money? Sorry about that. What is the advantage of money? And what does an increase in interest, why does an increase in the interest rate, decrease the quantity of money demanded? And so here we're very clearly talking about the money market graph. The money market graph is another graph we want to be familiar with. We have quantity of money on the x-axis, we have interest rate on the y-axis, we have our downward sloping demand curve, and then we have our money supply. Right? And so the way this works is that the money supply is a vertical line because there's only one number that represents the overall amount of money in circulation in the economy, right? And that number is going to be Q star or MS. And so it is not something that fluctuates. It's not something that changes based, like the quantity of money does not change based on the interest rate being charged. When we see monetary supply at work, what we're really seeing is shifts in the money supply line, right? So let's say the Fed decides to increase the money supply, what we're really seeing is a shift to the right for money supply. If we're saying the money supply is decreasing, what we're really seeing is a shift to the left in the money supply curve, right? And so that's what we see when we talk about money supply. On the other hand, we also have our demand curve. And so demand curve seems to be much more simple in terms of what we conventionally think of as a demand curve. It's a downward sloping line, a negative relationship between the x variable and the y variable. And so why is that the case in this situation? Why is a higher interest rate likely to result in a lower quantity of demand for money, lower demand for money, and why does a low interest rate suggest there would be a higher demand for money? And so the reason is fairly simple, right? If there is a high interest rate, what you're going to see happening is that people are going to be putting most of their money into savings accounts and banking accounts in order to take advantage of the high returns on savings through the interest rates. And so if people are going to be saving more money, they're keeping less money on hand, and therefore the demand for money, which is physically like having cash or bank deposits on hand, is going to be much lower. Similarly, if the interest rate is going to be really low, then there's going to be less people willing to save their money in interest accounts, and more people holding cash on hand, and that is going to be something that is going to lead to a higher quantity of money being demanded. Another way to think about this is from the borrower's perspective. So let's say you're an entrepreneur and you want to borrow money to invest in your own business. If the interest rate is really high, you're going to be less inclined to go and take out a loan, because the high interest rate means that any loan you take out now to pay for or invest in your business is going to require a very high return on when you end up paying back that loan plus interest. Meanwhile, if you're similarly an entrepreneur looking to invest in your own business, you want to take out a loan, and the interest rate is really low, you're going to be more likely to take out a larger amount of loans, because you know that even though you're taking out more money and you're holding more cash and investing that into your own business, the low interest rate means that you pay back very little money on the principal amount that you borrow. And so that's another way of thinking about the negative relationship between demand for money and interest rate. And so let's go back to the question at hand. What do economists mean by demand for money? They mean the demand by investors for, or demand by people to hold cash or demand deposits for either investment purposes or consumption purposes. So the next question says, what is the disadvantage of holding money? And so the biggest disadvantage of holding money is that it returns no interest. Let's say you emptied out your bank account right now and you just kept all that money in a drawer. That money does not earn any interest over time. And so by holding a lot of money, you are foregoing potential interest income if you were to instead invest that money into even a savings account, but also the stock market or mutual funds or other financial assets. On the other hand, there are some advantages, and that goes to the next question, which is, what is the advantage of holding money? And the advantage of holding money is that if you're holding cash, it's very liquid, and so you're very flexible in terms of cash flow. There's no need to move around assets when making purchases, and it's also risk-free. Holding money means that if there's suddenly a complete market crash and the value of financial assets goes down the drain, if you have no financial assets, then that has no effect on you. And so it's fairly insulated risk, right? Depending on how you define risk. So there are some advantages. And finally, the last question says, why does an increase in the interest rate decrease the quantity of money demanded? And again, we went over this. You can think about this from the saver's perspective. If there's a high interest rate, I want to save my money. I don't want to hold it, and so there's going to be lower demand. And you can also think of it from the investor's perspective. If there's a high interest rate, I'm not trying to take out a loan at a high interest rate to invest in my business if I know I have to pay that much interest on it. And so that is also going to decrease the quantity of money demanded. So hopefully that answers all those questions. And we can take a look at what the previous tutor has said as well. So the previous tutor says that in economics, the demand for money is the desire to hold financial assets in the form of money, cash or bank deposits, for transactionary, precautionary, and speculative motives. Demand for money, I like how I put that. Demand for money is a downward sloping curve that shows increase in demand with the fall of prices and vice versa. The disadvantage is that money does not earn interest and its value depreciates over time. And the advantage is that cash is the most liquid form of money, and holding it is beneficial because we can readily use it. And finally, with an increase in interest rates, people deposit more money with the bank to earn interest, and therefore money in their hands decreases. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think good answer. Answers all the things that were mentioned before, and we can mark that as correct.